I spent a lot of years in an orphanage. I spent years struggling through addictions. I've spent years dealing with separation and divorce and the pain of that, and now leukemia. And each one of these has been almost a way for me to recognize that all spiritual advances are preceded by a fall of some kind or another. My friend Elizabeth Kubler-Ross passed away a few years ago, used to say that if you shield the mountain from the windstorms, you'll never see the beauty of the carvings. And the storms of our life, and the storms of my life, in particular this recent one, we had talked about this earlier, about this leukemia, has brought me to just, it's brought me back to, you're calling it Source, I'm calling it God. It doesn't matter, we could call it Irene. It doesn't make any difference what we call it, because the Tao that can be named is not the Tao anyway. But what came into my life at this time, in the last couple of years with this, are just very significant people who have showed up in my life. Healing experience that I had with John of God down in Brazil, that was done remotely from Brazil to Maui. And I was told, I had someone come here to Maui, a physician. Her name was Dr. Reina Piscova. She's an eye surgeon in California. She wanted me to go down there because she'd heard I'd had leukemia. I couldn't go, or I didn't go. And she made all kinds of extra special arrangements for me to have photos taken, and all dressed in white, drinking certain kind of liquids, and having herbs that I was taking. And I had a healthy level of skepticism around this kind of thing, as I'm sure many of you do as well. But I urge you to, like Talopa said, have a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing. Like, just open your mind up to this, because from here, the night, it was the 21st of April this year, my mother's 95th birthday. And I had surgery at 7 o'clock in the morning from Brazil to Maui. I don't know how this gets done. And then a week later, I stayed in bed for a whole week. I could hardly even walk. I was so the day after the surgery, I got up and Reina had called me. She said, "Now you've had surgery." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, you can't swim and you can't do yoga and you can't walk and you can't do these kind of things." And I said, "I'm going for a walk." And I got 100 yards from my place and I collapsed and had to be helped back, and I was in bed for a week. And when they removed the sutures, which are invisible sutures, which don't exist even, from that moment on, Eckhart, something happened to me that was so, when Mary Oliver said, "Be astonished," and Rumi said, "Sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment," I've been in a state of bewilderment since that time. I had my 71st birthday just a few weeks after that, and all I wanted to do was give things away. I was filming in San Francisco at the St. Francis Hotel, and I took a wad of $50 bills and $100 bills, and just to all the homeless people that I could find. I would talk to them, and it was the most, and I was sobbing through this whole thing. It was like I became a basket case of love. And it's been half a year or more, and everyone I encounter and everything I see, everything just looks different. And it's like a return to an awareness that, I am well. I am perfect health. I don't go to doctors now. I don't have my numbers checked. I gave up yoga for a year after they told me I couldn't do hot yoga, and I believed them, and my body started getting tired and I couldn't do it. And then one morning I was just told, you can go do yoga. You don't have to avoid any of that. You're perfectly well. And then I met John of God in September up at Omega, where we first met. Just a few months ago, and I walked amongst, there was 1,500 people a day walking past him And I was just put in there. He had no idea who I was from anybody else. They didn't tell them how special I am, you know. I mean, neglected to tell that. And he looked at me and he just smiled, and in Portuguese he just said, "You are well." He said, "Please sit here and observe my interventions for the next 3 days," which is what I did. And it's just been love, Eckhart. It's just been love, love, love. I mean, it's almost like God entered, somehow they put a God consciousness in me that I thought I had because I'd been writing about it. And the old ego, I mean, it's always there. I don't know if you know this. I don't even know if I want to mention this, but I'm going to do it, obviously. You know, there's a list out on the internet of the 100 most spiritually influential people alive. Have you seen this list?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have. Yeah. You and I are going to have a talk here. So they have the 100 from the top to the bottom, and this is where the ego and the spirit are just it's just such an interesting thing. Because you're listening right now to the third most spiritually influential person alive. That's me. And that's my ego. Isn't that great? Thank you. And there's 2 people ahead of me on this list. Now my spirit says, you're not any better than anybody else. You're just connected to God like everyone else. Why would you even think that? And then the ego just is tapping me on the shoulder and said, I know you can take those 2 guys ahead of you down. So the number 2 spiritually influential person alive, according to Watkins, this list, is the Dalai Lama. And the number 1 spiritually spiritually influential person alive is Eckhart Tolle. So now I don't know whether we should get together and go after the Dalai Lama and then maybe we can arm wrestle. But it's that funny thing, it's all the time, because I use it on my kids all the time, you know. I even said to my ex-wife, you know, in your wildest dreams, could you ever imagine that you were married to the 3rd most spiritually influential person alive? She said, they didn't call me. And she said, I don't know how to break it to you, but you're not in my wildest dreams. But I think that's interesting that you, and I just found out about that list. The day I found out about that list, I got a call from Eckhart Tolle saying, would you like to, we're going to come to Maui, we'd like to do a conference together. And I thought, this is my chance, I'm going. I love you, man. I love you.
This is, the concepts like that come floating into your mind. I saw it also. Somebody sent me this list. These concepts have to be, when they come in, they have to be dropped like hot potatoes. Because if you hang on to it, that moment, the spirit gets obscured. If you think you are somebody who is somebody, immediately that would be the denial of the reality of it. So the art really is and it's tricky because I've seen it happen to other spiritual teachers. Some were able to drop the hot potato when people came with beliefs and projections about them. And I've seen others who took it on board and became burdened by some self-concept that others were projecting onto them. This is particularly more likely to happen if you live in an ashram and you're surrounded only by people who think you are the greatest. Then it's very easy to slip into that and start to believe in some concept of who you are,
right,
which immediately obscures the power of spirit.
Yeah, it's so true. I'm sure you know who Rabindranath Tagore, the great Indian poet, who won the Nobel Prize back in the 1920s. He talked about the ego. He had this great observation poetically. He said, I went out alone on my way to my tryst. But who is this me in the dark? I step aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame, but I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's
Beautiful.
that's Tagore. That's the ego. Yeah, that's for Tagore.
And I mentioned briefly yesterday with Ram Dass, I'm sure you can recognize it perhaps in your own experience, but it might be helpful for some of you. When let's say, just take a moment of coming here in the car from where we are staying to here to have this dialogue. At any moment, you can be either more a form identity, in which case your mind functions through your history, your concepts of who you are that others have told you and you believe, and you have created that mental self. And at any moment you can be either dwell more in this form identity of who you are, my name, my history, my achievements, or my failures, that they're all form identity, or you can be an essence identity, which is simply an aware presence, where you don't need to remember anything or think anything, just be that field of awareness. So the only way I can ever go to a talk, an important gathering, if I travel as spiritual teacher number 1 going to meet spiritual teacher number 3, it would create immediate stress. Because I would be carrying that a conceptual self, a dreadful burden. But if I can be free of a conceptual self and be simply a presence, just an innocent, aware presence, and as I say it now, perhaps each one of you can at this very moment find that within you can be either a person or you can be an aware presence. And then at this moment, and the aware presence is alive. Beauty is not bigger than, smaller than, more important than, but it's powerful, but not more powerful than. It's power itself. And there's no unease in it, because it competes with nothing. And so sometimes when I give, let's say I give a talk, or there's a gathering or retreat, I'm 100% kind of presence. The person isn't really there. And then in everyday life, perhaps it's hard to quantify, but I might be 30% person, 70% consciousness. It's a coming together of form and formlessness in daily life.
Do you find when you're in that higher place where you're like 100%, often in a meditation or wherever, but if you even if you leave the meditation and you just, like I was talking to you, what happened with that surgery and so on, and with this, my body just changing, and everything I look at and everyone that I look at is just so, I'm just so astonished and so bewildered and basically just feeling so loved. Do you find personally, Eckhart, that your opportunity to serve literally strangers, whatever, I mean, people, you almost like see opportunities to be God, I mean, how do you define, I mean, I always use the poets because I do a lot of poetry myself. Hafiz said, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Just think what a love like that can do. It lights up the whole world. And I have found that people who are needing something that I have to give them keep showing up, and it's such a joy to give away, to serve, whether it's advice, whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's clothes, whatever it might be. I mean, does that happen for you?
Yes, all the time. That's. I can see, by the way, in your eyes. We met for the first time. Was it 10 years ago at Omega?
Right.
Very briefly, and you were a lovely being then, but now I can see perhaps the physical challenge that you are facing perhaps did that. It eroded your ego, and there's in your eyes there's a wonderful this love and tenderness, and I believe the grace that came through the illness, that came into your life through that.
I can't tell you how many sick people that I've been able to help that have just sort of shown up for me. And when I just did this television special, which will air all over the world for years and years, and it feels like such a, even just to be here and to see these faces and to know that out there that people are going to be touched by. I mean, we got a world full of cancer, we got a world, and it's almost all from fear. I mean, and the Course says always, there's only fear and love, and everything that is fear cannot be love, and everything that is love cannot be fear. So you get your choice, and it seems to me we're talking about sending fear out of our lives and judgment, and in the I Am discourses it says that if you can remove judgment, criticism, and condemnation towards any of God's children, I believe that means the planet as well, then that's when you will be able to manifest for yourself the life that you desire. As soon as you can rid yourself of those three things, judgment, criticism, condemnation. Yeah.
Yes, which are all thought forms.
Right.
That in itself would be enough. But of course, the deeper implication of that is that you can remove yourself from identification with those thought forms, and so you can be the awareness rather than the thought form. Otherwise, if you say, I mustn't judge, you can still be stuck in the mind. I must love my neighbor as myself. No, you have to step out of the thought form so that you can be present with your neighbor. Give your neighbor means anybody, give your neighbor complete and full spacious attention, and that's the love arises out of that.